Today I'm going to introduce you to my friend Weil. Weil is so vile it makes the verb run a mile. So, weil is so vile, it makes the verb run a mile. There are 5 key terms that you will need to know in order to understand how to use weil in German. The first is clause, the second is main clause, the third is subordinate clause, the fourth is subordinating conjunction, and finally verb. It is no longer good enough to talk simply about writing a sentence in German, particularly where you want to make it more complex. We think of a sentence as having a capital letter at the start and finishing with a full stop. We're actually going to be producing sentences, but in these sentences we are going to have a main clause and a subordinate clause, and it will be linked using a subordinating conjunction. First, let's take the word clause. We think of a clause really as being something that has grammatically a subject and a verb. Let's think of a couple of examples. Let's take one in English first of all. My dad eats cake. There we have a clause. We know it is a clause because it has a subject, my dad, and it has a verb, eats. Alternatively, we could use a sentence such as, I like eating potatoes. This again is a clause. It contains a subject, which is I, and a verb, like. Okay, so we can use both of these with the subordinate clause in German. So, my German sentence is going to be, mein Vater isst Kuchen. Okay, that is going to become my main clause. My subordinate clause is going to be, it is delicious. Ist lecker. It. I've used because Kuchen is masculine. The subordinating conjunction, the word I am going to use to link it together, is weil. And it is really important that I know where my verb in my subordinate clause is. In this case, it is ist. So here we have it. We have our main clause, mein Vater isst Kuchen. We have our subordinate clause, ist lecker. And we've got our subordinating conjunction here, weil. Now remember, weil is so vile it makes the verb run a mile. I'll show you how it works. Okay, let's take first of all our main clause and our subordinating conjunction. That's really important in German, that you put a comma after the main clause before you use your subordinating conjunction. Now remember, weil is so vile, he makes the verb run a mile. Okay, so we're going to move our subordinate clause over next to weil. Okay, remember, weil is so vile, he makes the verb run a mile, and he does just that. When you use weil, you have to make sure that your subordinate clause finishes with the verb. So I have put the verb here at the end of my subordinate clause, and I can now put my full stop. There we have our sentence. The sentence consisting of a main clause linked with a subordinate clause, subordinating conjunction, a comma to separate the two, and our verb, which has been kicked to the end of our subordinate clause. So, weil is a subordinating conjunction in German. Weil is used to link two clauses together. There has to be a main clause containing a verb and a subject. Weil is used to link the subordinate clause to the main clause. Weil is so vile it makes the verb run a mile by kicking the verb to the end. And finally, the subordinate clause and the main clause must be separated by a comma. Nicht vergessen! Weil is so vile it makes the verb run a mile. Don't forget to separate the main clause and the subordinate clause with a comma and send the verb of the subordinate clause to the end of the sentence. Viel Glück und tschüss!